Chapter 3, Advancing Word Power. Ambiguous, dissident, embellish, fritter, inadvertent, inane, juxtapose, lethargy, sporadic, subsidize. Ambiguous. The portrait known as the Mona Lisa is famous for the woman's ambiguous expression. Is she smiling or not? Omar left an ambiguous message on my answering machine. Meet me at 12 o'clock. I couldn't tell whether he meant noon or midnight. Unclear. Dissident. Some dissidents in the Catholic Church favor such changes as allowing women to be priests and allowing priests to marry. In a dictatorship, dissidents are not tolerated. People who speak out against the government may be imprisoned or even executed. A rebel. Embellish. Lauren embellished the door of her room with postcards from her friends and photos of her cats. The cover of the biology textbook was embellished with a pattern of colorful seashells. To decorate. Fritter. I thought my little sister would fritter away her entire allowance on M&Ms, but instead of wasting her money, she put it in her piggy bank. Vince fritters away both his time and his money playing game after game in video arcades. To waste. Inadvertent. Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin was inadvertent. He forgot to cover a dish of bacteria, and some mold got into it. The next day, Fleming found that the mold had killed the bacteria. The final draft of Nancy's paper was shorter than the previous version, but this was inadvertent. She had accidentally deleted an entire page without realizing it. Not intended. Inane. Silly. The conversation at the party was inane, consisting of mainly of foolish comments about whose clothes were the most awesome. Television programming is often so inane that TV has been described as bubblegum for the mind. Silly. Never fritter time. Never fritter money. Juxtapose. The photograph dramatically juxtaposed white birch trees and dark gray sky. Dottie spread her new dress out on her bed and then juxtaposed all her scarves and jackets to see which combination would look best to put side by side. Lethargy. Although Wendy seemed to recover from the flu, her lethargy persisted. She felt exhausted for weeks. With the hot weather, lethargy descended upon the class. The students had trouble staying awake, and even the instructor gazed dreamily out the window. Weariness. Sporadic. It rained continually until noon. After that, there were only sporadic showers. Dave makes sporadic attempts to give up smoking, but his occasional efforts have been half-hearted, irregular. Subsidized. During college, many students are subsidized by their parents, while others rely on grants or loans. Public television is subsidized by various grants and by individual and community donations to pay for. Juxtapose. To place close together, especially in order to compare or contrast. Lethargy. A great lack of energy. Inactivity due to laziness, sluggishness, ambiguous. Able to be interpreted in more than one way, not clear. Inane, without sense or meaning, foolish. Dissident. A person opposed to established ideas or beliefs, especially in politics or religion. Embellish. To decorate, beautify, by adding details. Subsidize. To support financially. Provide a grant or contribution. Fritter. To spend or waste a little at a time. Inadvertent. Unintentional, accidental. Sporadic, happening now and then, occasional. Alexander Fleming. He grudged. Lethargy. Instead of refreshing me, an afternoon nap only deepens my lethargy. I wake up even sleepier than I was before. Sporadic. I get great news of Darren only now and then. Sporadic letters from him or his mother. Subsidize. A grant will subsidize Belinda's study of common fears among the elderly. Inadvertent. My recent trip to Newark was inadvertent. I wanted to go to New York City, but I got on the wrong train. Fritter. Tracy has learned the hard way not to fritter away her time and her affection on friends who don't really care about her. Embellish. My little brother has embellished his bedroom ceiling with stars, arranged like several of the constellations. Juxtapose. In the plays and movies, good and evil characters are often juxtaposed. This contrast makes the good ones seem even better, and the bad ones seem even worse. Dissident. When student dissidents, led by a protest against China's communist leaders in 1989, some students were killed by government troops. Ambiguous. Checking a job applicant's references, the personnel manager was puzzled by one's ambiguous comment, "You'll be lucky if you can get her to work for you." Inane. Steve Martin was poking fun at inane ideas for products when he said, "I got a fur sink and an electric dog polisher, a gasoline-powered turtleneck sweater, and of course, I bought some stuff too." Spring fever isn't really a detriment to health, but often it includes lethargy. People just want to sleep. Also, attention to work is interrupted off and on by an sporadic need to daydream. Juxtapose. On the cover of the news magazine, two pictures were juxtaposed, those of a young dissident and an elderly ruler he was opposing. Local businesses subsidized our club's Christmas parties for the homeless, so we were able to afford a special meal as well as decoration to embellish the room. Why do you want to fritter away your money, week after week on tickets for silly movies that all the critics agree are inane? Likely. This week's episode of one television serial had an ambiguous ending. We don't know whether one of the characters survives his heart attack or dies. In retrospect, I don't think this was inadvertent. I believe the producers wanted to keep us guessing, so we'll have to tune in again next week. Last Saturday, my grandfather and I spent some time in the modern section of an art museum. Our visit was completely inadvertent. We'd come to see a show of nature photographs and wandered into the wrong room. Instead of leaving, grandfather just stood there staring at the paintings. His idea of worthwhile art is the soft-focused photography on greeting cards. And here was an exhibit of angry paintings by political dissidents. In one painting, an empty plate and a plate that was piled high with food had been in one painting, an empty plate and a plate that had been piled high with food had been on the table. The embellished? What? Embellish? Around the painting was an ornate garden frame, embellished, that's where embellished should be, with tiny plastic models of hot dogs, pies, and other typical American foods. There was nothing inadvertent about the message. It was crystal clear. The artist was saying that some people in this country don't have enough to eat. After a few moments of stunned silence, my grandfather jolted the sleepy-looking guard out of his lethargy by shouting, "Garbage! What is this garbage? Garbage! What is this garbage?" When we learned that the two major corporations had collaborated to this exhibit and even owned some of the artworks. Grandfather was out to subsidize this exhibit, and it was some of his work. His work. Grandfather was outraged. How dare they fritter away their money on a piece of unpathetic, unpatriotic trash after another while people are starving? I started to say that the painting itself was a protest against starvation, but grandfather just scoffed at me. Don't be inane, he said, squelching. Inane, he said, squelching my attempt to explain the painting. Let's get out of here. So we did. On our way home, grandfather stared out the window. He was silent except for sporadic sputterings of garbage and incredible. Okay, this is now definitely. Which one is it? That's right. The energy plate was so high that food had been blent on the table. Juxtapose? What? Juxtapose? Probably. Finn! Good enough. Oh, see what I thought I could cheery you up. Taken aback. Taken aback's there. No notes there. At 8. Chapter 3, Advancing Word Power, Sherrie, Nist Townshed, and Toyas. More I could say.